to our audience out there tonight. This should be a good one because we have two seasoned debaters who will go at it here in a few moments. Firstly, we have Amy Newman, who is a well-known regular on Modern Day Debate. And then we have Gavin Hurlimann, who is itching to have a discussion with Amy because this debate has been postponed several times. And it's finally, we got it here tonight, ready to go, and I appreciate both of our debaters for engaging tonight. But before they face off, I think it should be proper for them to give a brief introduction about themselves, just so the audience can get a little bit more acquainted. We'll hand off to Gavin, since you're the regular on here. We'll let you go first, and then give it to Amy, and then we'll get started.
Sure. So most of the people here will know my name is Gavin. I'm really pleased that Amy has hung in there with me through all these lockdowns and COVID-19 alerts. It's been it's probably close to 4 months we've been in lockdown, so it's been a tiresome 4 months, but I'm really thankful that she's just kept in touch by email, always been polite, always been courteous, and I think that's great. So I'm looking forward to a good debate, good discussion in the good spirit, and hoping people learn something from today's back and forth.
Awesome, Gavin. I appreciate your introduction there. And Amy, if you want to give an intro about yourself, that would be awesome.
Sure. What is up, everyone out there on the interwebs? I am Amy Newman. I have a skeptic-themed channel out there on YouTube. And along with my co-host, James W., we do a whole bunch of, I would say, religious-themed content, but then we also like to go out there on all sorts of subjects that would be, I'm often called a NASA shill. And so if you would like to have any good back and forth with people that would just like to hear your point of view, come on down, because we're sending hearts.
Awesome. Yeah, check out Amy's channel. It's always something going on there. And so, all right, let's get the show on the road. Just a FYI, I predicate myself as being a neutral moderator. So if the audience has any criticism or feedback, please let me know. And tonight's format is 10 to 12-minute openings, and the rest will be open discussion. And then we'll have audience Q&A. So please tag me for any questions so we can put the Q&A session. And also, I don't know if there is any after shows, but if anyone wants to put it up there, we'll promote that. And if anyone wants the after show, just let us know. And I guess that'll end that. So, all right, Gavin, the floor is yours, and I'll start the timer when you are ready. Let me know.
Sure. Can you put my first slide up, please?
Sure. And let's make sure we got this going on correctly here. All right. So your first one, is it the non-local one, or is it the...
No, it's the mind exists. The properties of the mind are not that which matter can have. That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
So
okay.
let me get the timer started, and I'll put that up, and then we'll kick her off here. I'm looking forward to this one. Both of it should be an amicable, good discussion tonight. Let me get that timer going. On your first word, I'll put that slide up for you.
Okay. So thank you very much to Amy. Thanks, Praise, for hosting this. So the debate topic tonight is there good evidence for God? ? So, as a classical apologist, I'll be arguing that a theistic or deistic worldview is more probable given the evidence. So I don't claim I can prove God exists empirically, and I won't be specifically arguing for Christian theism tonight. I'll be arguing for basic theism or deism, and I'll present two arguments that show that the existence of God is probable. And my aim is to show that theism or deism is the best explanation given all the available data. So, Praise, can you... Oh, the slide's already up. Praise is so on it. All right. So, we'll start off firstly, premise one. Premise one, the mind exists. I don't think anyone's going to squabble about that. Now, premise 2, the properties of the mind are that which matter. The properties of the mind are not that which matter can have. And that means things like senses, smells, taste, shapes, feelings, sights, they're all mental experiences. Our entire perception of the world is just that, it's mental perception. For example, no chemist or doctor or anybody, physicist, can show the chemical composition of love or supererogatory behavior, for example. And then that person experience it. Like, so you can't, no chemist can show you a vial full of love and you drink it and then experience love. It just doesn't work that way. So our entire life experience is mental. It is mental and not physical. Physical objects, when not being observed, they do not seem to have colours, sounds, tastes, weights, etc. So the conclusion to that is that the mind is not reducible to matter. So the next thing, I just want to put a caveat in here before I get to the conclusion. The caveat is that substance dualism is false. I think Amy would probably agree with that, but if not, we could sort of talk about that with Spinoza's dissertation on that subject. So for substance dualism, it's false because if for two substances to interact, you need a shared property. If two substances share a property, you're actually just talking about different aspects of the same substance. So that's why substance dualism is out. Anyway, conclusion is all is mind. All is mind. So, can I have the next slide, please, Pros? All right. So this is a far more simpler way of looking at it. And if God, this is looking at it this way. If God does not exist, then intentional states of consciousness also would not exist. So premise number 2, intentional states of consciousness do exist. They do exist. Nobody's going to argue with that. So therefore, the conclusion is God exists. Right. So in the last decade or so, physicists have found something that they call the holographic principle, which means they talk about the universe as a hologram analogously, and that means comparable in certain respects, typically in a way which makes clearer the nature of things compared. And this is that the universe emerges from this underlying information processing. So a lot of what the evidence is pointing to is that the universe is emergent. It's emergent. And even notable atheist physicists like Sean Carroll, for example, he says space is obviously not fundamental, and he's right. Space more or less disappears when we move from classical mechanics to quantum mechanics, says Sean Carroll. Now, this admission, it's a good admission, and it's true, but this admission just adds weight and strength to the cosmological arguments, because if the entire space-time is itself emergent, then it has to be emergent on something more fundamental than what we can see or experience. So what space-time emerges from must be immaterial, must be timeless, eternal, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. It also must be immanent in this world, but while at the same time must be transcendent simultaneously to this world. And guess what? These properties, features, characteristics, attributes, whatever you want to call them, they're all they are the underlying function of an immaterial necessary mind. Secular philosophers will call this, please, could I have the next slide up, please? The non-local observer. Yeah. So for secular physicists, they will call this immaterial necessary mind something like a non-local observer. But this non-local observer is what theists call God. And this diagram is it's easily available to anybody. If you just Google NASA, NASA, and then the letters WMAP, then you get this diagram. And this is NASA's diagram of how they pictured the universe coming into being, because the universe had a definite start. It's not eternal. Okay, so just leave that up for a little while, praise. So a common pushback from skeptics is something like, what evidence do you have that this immaterial, necessary mind you call God exists? There's lots of examples, but one of the best examples is from Austrian physicist Anton Zeilinger. Anton Zeilinger, who in 1994, which is a long time ago, he conducted a series of interaction-free experiments where subatomic particles had no interaction with a measuring device or with an observer. Prior to these experiments, it was always thought that the observer caused the wave function to collapse. But Zeilinger and his team, they repeated the same experiments, but they didn't use an observer or any measuring tools. And so what happened? Well, the wave function still collapsed. And so Zeilinger put out a paper on this that has a really long name. It's called The Experimental Realization of Interaction-Free Measurements. And it's in the list of references. Hopefully that price is put in the video description, or IFM for short. So a copy of this paper is actually in the list of references available in the video description. What the IFM experiments done by Zeilinger demonstrate is that it isn't the presence of a measuring device or an observer that causes the wave function to collapse. It is the knowledge. It's the knowledge. Praise, you can probably put that slide down now. Thanks, brother. Yeah. So it isn't the measuring device or the presence of an observer that causes the wave function to collapse. What causes the wave function, in the case of Zeilinger and his colleagues, was the knowledge inside their minds of which path information that actually causes the wave function to collapse. Therefore, the collapse of the wave function is not about what the observer... Therefore, the collapse of the wave function is about what the observer knows in their mind, and not about what the subatomic interaction is. That was a bit of a breakthrough, because for ages, physicists always thought it was the presence of an observer or measuring device that caused the wave function collapse. But then Zeilinger decided one day to repeat the experiment with no observation, no measuring or anything, and the result was exactly the same, as if there was an observer there or measuring device there. So that was pretty eyebrow lifting. So as Sir Rudolf Perez says, you see the quantum mechanics description is in terms of knowledge, and knowledge requires an entity who knows. Now, the implications of the physical universe coming from a pseudo-nothing, like Lawrence Krauss would like to posit, or from underlying information processing, doesn't really come as a surprise to CS, because our own scriptures cohere with this explanation. We can see in Genesis 1:3, where it recounts how God spoke the universe into being. Psalm 33, verse 9, the text says, he spoke and it came to be, he commanded it and it stood firm. And finally, in Hebrews 11, verse 3, it says, by faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So, unless my learned opponent can show that consciousness is emergent from the brain, the most likely and most parsimonious explanation is that consciousness is irreducible, Okay, it can't be reduced. It's irreducible, and thus contingent minds like all of us, me, Amy, Praise, everyone in the chat, would most likely, not proven, but most likely be contingent on a larger conscious mind that controls reality and brings other contingent minds into existence. So this larger non-contingent conscious mind is what we refer to as God. So that's all I have to say about that. Praise, can you flick that clip on? And when the clip finishes, and then I'm done, then it's Amy's turn.
Here we go.
And now I'll let Mikio Kaku experimental processes. Remember the scenario set up in the quantum enigma about opening the box. If we decide to look in one box and find where the atom is, we do not actually decide where it will end up. We just use our free will to participate in deciding what the outcome will be, whether a wave or a particle result. But we don't get to choose the specifics. So the evidence suggests we are just lesser minds dependent on a much larger one that is actually in control of the structure of the experience, and we are allowed to operate and be able to participate in the outcome of the idealist experience. Now, one objection to the theistic perspective is raised in the quantum enigma. If God is observing the physical world and us in it, then how come we can do experiments showing something unobserved is in a superposition? In other words, if God is looking down at everything, the strange rules of quantum mechanics should never have been verified, since they are always being observed by God. Well, this is a misunderstanding. God is not separate from us, someplace in space observing us, as space and matter are illusions of our conscious observation, as the falsification of realism shows. The existence of the physical world is created by our observation of it, and it doesn't exist other than that. So what is there for God to observe other than what we see? Consciousness is what is fundamental, and our consciousness would be dependent on a larger one. God is in a sense observing us having an experience of the physical world. And apart from our experience, there is nothing that needs to be observed, as it exists in the state of a wave function. So he is not separate from us, as our consciousness is dependent on his, and he doesn't need to see an independent experience of the physical world. So thus we can conclude no other. Given the scientific evidence that has led us this far, what other inference does this lead to? Of course, one can always refuse to go with us to the logical conclusion, but that does not refute the conclusion or change it. Science has not buried God, it has revealed him, and with it buried materialism.
Well, with that, that ends Gavin's presentation opening. It's around 15 or about 16 minutes, Amy. So you have plenty of time here. Since you guys foregoed your I think you guys decided not to do a cross exam or rebuttal. So take your time, Amy. How much time you need, we'll give it to you, and we'll start the timer when you're ready, and I'll let it go to you. The floor is yours.
I appreciate that opening, Gavin, and thank you once again for moderating praise. And all right, evidence for God. But what I really want is good evidence for God, because people's eyewitness testimony is evidence. It's just not enough for me to believe someone came back from the dead, which is one of the many miracle claims that would supposedly prove a God exists, though I never quite understood the logic. Sure, doing magic tricks like Moses parting the Red Sea, or Muhammad flying over the moon on a winged creature are neat, and I assume great at dinner parties. However, there is no connection between these events and a God, other than they are all in holy books and believed by their respective followers. That's because, as Arthur C. Clarke once wrote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. A fantastic example of this is shown in the question atheists often get from theists about stars in the sky. After all, if the stars began to align in a constellation that says God is real, wouldn't we be justified in believing so? Well, no. And I understand people's gut reaction would be to fall on our knees and possibly worship our alien brothers and sisters. However, this can easily be dismissed by thinking of the reverse. If the stars aligned into a constellation that said God is not real, would theists suddenly hang up their yarmulkes, crosses, or hijabs? Some would, but my guess is most would not. There's nothing outside the natural realm going on here. And the amount of power to do such a feat would be undeniably massive. However, something like this never happens. What we get is claims like a sweet Jewish boy turning water into wine, which I assume would go over great at frat parties, but it has nothing to do with the creator of the universe, any more than any other quote unquote superpower would give credence to such a claim. Though miracle claims are rarely the focus of a person's conversion story. That's because the vast majority seem to be placed in personal experience. Someone's life was changed in a drastic manner, or maybe they were even saved from a near-death experience. However, these aren't really good evidence for a God. That's because they can't be verified or replicated, which means we have no way of verifying the experiences or what actually happened. Was it God that pulled someone back from the brink of death, or the AMT? Thus, most theistic claims retreat to some form of deism, trying to use vague language like the kalam, where begins to exist is there to smuggle in God. Worse, some theists will go as far as to give up and head towards solipsism, wondering how we can even have logic without a God. However, never demonstrating how their God helps us actually do anything useful, like buy a cup of coffee, in the real physical world. I'll end with two syllogisms and what I really want. It's true that atheists, especially the agnostic flavor, don't have a burden of proof. I don't think there is good evidence for God. However, I also think there are good reasons for a God not to exist, especially the kind that is a mind which cares about who we have sex with. Kind of like syllogism 1. If Adam and Eve were literal beings, then sinning exists in this world. A literal Adam and Eve did not exist. Therefore, sinning does not exist in this world. But how about bring it back a step? If a conscious, all-powerful God wanted a personal relationship with me, I would know about them. I don't know about them. Therefore, a conscious, all-powerful God who wanted a personal relationship with me does not exist. Though, if I'm being honest, what I really want is empirical evidence, something testable, replicatable, and verifiable. by people other than myself. It's a shame this all-powerful God can't seem to show up. Until that time, if we want good evidence for God, we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Awesome. About 7.5 there, 7.5 minutes, but we'll add that to the open discussion. Gavin, are you ready to go here, buddy? And whenever,
yeah.
Since she ended, we'll let you start with the open discussion here. I think you guys are going to have a nice, fluid and flowing conversation, but I will jump in if there's over talking. Hopefully, you guys can have a good, amicable discussion, and I'll go ahead and step out.
Yeah, praise. Well, I'm gonna try and steal man Amy's opening statement as best I can. While I'm doing that, do you recall that that short clip I sent to you of that woman who was paralyzed for 22 years?
Yes, I think so, but I have to dig it up though.
Okay, all right. Going to just give me a sec. Have to go back to drawing board. All right, so Amy, I'm going to attempt to steal man your opening because I think it's important. I think it's important that we're able to do this because it kind of demonstrates that we're listening to the other side. So some of this might be wrong, but it's the best I can do, and I can't write that fast either. So now you talked about eyewitness testimony, and you question mark the resurrection of Christ. That's okay. I mean, you're allowed to do that, but then the obvious question is, if the resurrection of Christ didn't happen, why has it not been falsified after 20 centuries? And then you talked about Moses.
Or do you want to?
Yeah, no. Far ahead. Go for it.
I think those sorts of claims can't be falsified because he's dead, and so we would need a Jesus to come back and give us some sort of evidence. I know that to many theists, they'll say that's unfair. You want Jesus to actually come back and shake your hand. And I would say, yes, knowing what I know, that the Christians believe in this all-powerful deity that should be able to really coming down should actually be easy. That should be like performing all the miracles again. All of that stuff should be like snapping to an all-powerful God. Sure.
How do you contend with the enemies of Christ? And there were a lot. They were right there on that Sunday morning, and yet all of his enemies remained silent about his resurrection being a hoax or being a made-up story. How do you contend with that?
I would, first of all, we would have to be able to verify, but the crucifixion is such a weird claim because I can easily think of more evil things that happened to more innocent people than Jesus. I know the claim is he was the most innocent, but I'll give you an example. ISIS crucifies children upside down. And so it's just easy to say there's a whole row of crucified children upside down that clearly suffered worse than Jesus, were more innocent than Jesus. And I just don't see the connection to him suffering and being a good guy and being a deity at all.
Yeah, sure. That's okay. But that doesn't really answer my question. My question is, Christ had a lot of enemies, especially the Pharisees and Sadducees who got him crucified. And they were there. They were right there on the Sunday morning when he resurrected. And yet none of his enemies called out the resurrection as a hoax, as a story, anything like that. And his followers, especially the disciples, they went almost overnight. They transformed from these scared, timid individuals, because they thought they were next. They really thought they were next because their leader had been put to death. They were transformed overnight, boom, like that, from being scared, timid individuals into these courageous men who had a disdain for death. You know, they were more than happy to be put to death in Christ's name. So how do you explain that? How do you explain that his enemies were right there on the Sunday morning, never said anything against the resurrection, and his followers were transformed overnight from scared, timid individuals into brave, heroic men who had a disdain for death?
So I can't read their mind. It could have been, because once again, we're getting most of this information from the Bible itself. It could have been that they just became convinced, and thus once you feel like you're going to have a second life, I mean, it is one of the reasons I dislike concepts of afterlife, because I think it can make you do dangerous things when you believe in an afterlife. But I don't understand even the connection. Like, what is the connection between someone coming back from the dead and them being the son of a god?
Well, the connection is really easy. If you are God in human form, then clearly you're going to have dominion over things like the laws of quantum mechanics, right? Turning water into red wine is going to be a breeze for you, isn't it? Making dead people come back to life is going to be no sweat, right?
I would say if you are an omnipowerful God, I agree with you. That would be no sweat. But do you think that is the only way that someone could make water into wine or make someone come back from the dead? As in, if there is technology in the future that can bring someone back to life 3 days, maybe even more. Let's say they can bring them back a week after the dead. So even more than Jesus had. Does that make that person a god?
Now, you have to be conscious of the difference in the cultures and societies. Today, we live in what's called a low-context society in the 21st century. In the first century, they lived in what's called a high-context society. So they didn't have any of the technology we have today. And someone who was dead as, and remember those Roman soldiers, they had to make sure that Christ was dead, because the penalty for them, if he was still alive when they pulled him down off the cross, was for them to forfeit their lives. So it was highly in their interest to make sure he was dead. So he was dead. You know,
see, but I'm not a mythicist. I'm like a little bit, you know, I get flack from both sides trying to go either way. I could even grant you, just like I could grant Muhammad was real, but I do not think Muhammad was a prophet of God. I do not think Jesus was a prophet of God, and I don't think Moses existed. And so that kind of schmelding makes me highly skeptical of all of the Abrahamic religions that have been presented.
There are accounts outside of the Bible of Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection, and these are what's called enemy attestation, particularly the accounts from Josephus and Tacitus, because they were Jewish Romans. Tacitus was certainly Roman, so no friends of the Jews. And they wrote histories, and they wrote that Jesus was crucified and died, and then his believers, his followers, believed they saw him alive and well 3 days after he died. So that's a writing.
But if I can interrupt you, if I can interrupt you, it has nothing to do with being crucified, and it has nothing to do with the sacrifice and coming back from the dead. And I'll give you the example. If someone was crucified, once again, in a worse manner. They tortured someone and then they crucified them, and it was for longer. And it took a week, and then they were resurrected. They were resurrected. We don't know how, but would that be evidence that they were the prophet of God?
The fact that Christ was dead, clinically dead, and then 3 days later he was alive and well, proves that he conquered death. So he has dominion. He has dominion. He has mastery over the laws of quantum physics.
But are those traits of a God? As in, if someone were to come to you and they were able to resurrect people from the dead, they were able to turn water into wine, would you sway in the direction of thinking that they're a prophet of God and maybe their deity is the right one?
In the case of Jesus Christ, he was definitely God. He was God who stepped out of heaven 2,000 odd years ago on that rescue mission that everybody seems to know about. And like I say, because he had mastery over the laws of quantum physics, absolutely he was God. So anyway, you talked about Moses parting the Red Sea, and you didn't think that was possible. Well, again, you know, I put it to you that if God has mastery over the law of quantum physics, parting a sea would be pretty easy. Would you not think?
I would agree, but we are taking on board the omnis, and I don't believe that a omni-based creature exists. I feel like it's saying, if God can do anything, can't he do anything? Well, sure. But when you're breaking the laws of physics, you need a reason why. What is going on here? Why is it happening? You know, dark energy, dark matter. We're driven to these types of physics concepts, even though we can only understand them from different theories. We don't actually understand what dark energy is, but we're driven to it because of other reputable theories. How would we go about showing that a God exists 2,000 years after the supposed death and resurrection of a prophet?
Okay, we'll come to that. I just want to keep moving through with the steel man, otherwise we're going to be here for forever. So you talked also about Muhammad flying over the moon, and you talked about Arthur C. Clarke saying something like, "This might be wrong or it might be right." Something like cutting edge technology sometimes is not distinguishable from magic. You talked about the stars and the constellations aligning themselves up, saying God is real, and then perhaps we would need to worship our alien brothers and sisters. I just asterisk that, because talking about aliens, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial life, search for extraterrestrial, I don't know what the I stands for, but that's been an international consortium since the 80s, and they've been sending out signals since the 80s, and they've not had one reply. So the chances of there being alien life are extremely slim. So if the stars aligned and said God is not real, you talked about if some people would give up their belief, some people wouldn't. You also said there is nothing beyond the natural going on here. I would highly dispute that. He talked about a Jewish boy turning water into wine. And again, I said that because Christ is God, he would have dominion over the laws of quantum physics. You also talked about...
Before we go on, because there's a few things I want to respond to. Like the alien life, you said that it's highly improbable that we're going to find alien life, or we're currently finding alien life. While I admit that we have not found alien life, and it may be hard, especially to find multicellular intelligent life, I believe that the chances to find single-celled life like a virus or a bacteria is much higher than a God, because we already have a single example of a life. We have no examples of a God.
Right. Okay. And you also spoke about some conversions seem to be based on or around some kind of hypernatural experiences.
Yes.
You also said something about most explanations of God retreat to deism. I mean, I'm not arguing for the Christian God here. I'm just simply arguing for God. Arguing for the Christian God is another topic, and I'd love to have that discussion with you. But we're just arguing for God at the moment.
And if I can say, I'm not taking pot shots at you personally. It's just in my experience, it is much easier and much, I think, philosophical, satisfying for theists to argue from a deistic position than especially a monotheistic religion, because once you get into the logistics, once you get into the weeds, we're going to actually want you to empirically verify these claims.
Yeah, well, I am arguing for a monotheistic deity. Yeah, I am. But just not the Christian deity, because that's another argument. But that could be another debate another time. That'd be great. You also talked about atheists and agnostics don't really have to bear any burden of proof. There's a big question mark with that, because in a debate, I'm taking the affirmative side, which is saying God does exist, and these are the evidences for his existence. Now, my interlocutor, which is you, which is great, you come to the table with the opposite point of view, that God does not exist for these particular evidences, and that's great. So I think we both have a burden of proof to bear in a debate.
You and also if I could just comment on that. So
sure.
My joke normally is I'm a medium atheist between like a soft and a hard atheist, because I don't believe that all gods can be disproven. I don't think you can get 100% absolute certainty in anything, including that statement. But I do think that there are gods that we can soundly not believe in, that the evidence is actually on the other side. And so I would say the lay agnostic atheist who is just skeptical and waiting for evidence, I think that's a good position to have. I think after being in the apologetics and counter-apologetics debate community, I actually think there are good syllogistic and scientific reasons for why we should not think a mind-based God is real.
Okay, that's okay. Now, you also said sinning does not exist. If God wanted a personal relationship with you, then you would know about it. And I think you finished up with, if we want good evidence for God, it seems like we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And that's about all I could remember and all I could write down. So can I get you, Amy, can I get you to do your best to steel man my opening statement?
I would say that you believe that there are good reasons as to why we have to live in a mind, and that there are reactive physical ways that you think we can detect that this mind either had creation or affects the world in some way, in something like quantum mechanics.
That's it?
I have lots of points, so let's see. Yeah, I can go over your thing.
Yeah, I'm wanting you to steel man my argument, please.
Well, we could go. You have two different syllogistic arguments. Why? You said the principle of mind exists. The mind is not reducible to matter. That's one of yours. You said if God did not exist, intentional states or conscious would not exist. And then you then said intentional states do exist. Therefore, the conclusion is that God also exists. I disagree with premise one. We could talk about that. You had issues with love and it not being able to be reduced to like a chemical composition. I actually think it can be reducible to a chemical composition, and then the events that proceed and go on afterwards. You were talking about the space-time, how it is a omni force, the three omnis, along with a transcendent force. I disagree, but we were talking about a non-local observer, how you believe that because of a wave function collapse, it has to deal with a mind formed at God's command by a non-contingent mind. I disagree with a non-contingent mind. I actually think gods are contingent on human minds. I believe that if humans and sentient beings did not exist, conscious beings did not exist, I don't believe gods would exist because I think we created them. I've covered Schrodinger's cat. Consciousness confirms everything. I think we're getting to the video. The world exists without us. I wrote that because I think someone was saying, the video was saying the world would exist. It wouldn't exist without us. I think the world existed far before consciousness. I think consciousness is a multicellular activity. I think minds are a multicellular activity, which means that billions of years the world was actually around, the universe was actually around before any detectable consciousness. I can't see that. He is not separated from us. I would like to know how he is with us, but I'm trying. Jesus events transformed. We're getting in the coming back from the dead, though those weren't your main arguments. They were more of an deistic side, so I just have more notes from me like Josephus and alien life not existing.
Good on you. Well done. Well done, Amy. I'll tell you what, that's a lot better than some people I've debated. When I asked them to steel man my position, all you can hear sometimes is crickets because they're so intent. They're so intent on getting their point across. You know, it's like they just can't hear what I'm saying. So that was a good job. Good on you for that. So let's just, if we can focus on these series of experiments done back in 1994.
Okay.
What happened was physicists had observed that wave function collapses when there is the presence of a measuring device or an observer, either a human observer or some kind of technological observer. Now, Anton Zeilinger and his team, they'd done dozens of these experiments, and it was always this collapse of the wave function was always attributed to there being an observer or a measuring device. And then Zeilinger decided to do a series of experiments without any observation, any measuring device whatsoever, just to see what would happen, And so he set everything up, him and his team set everything up, and they ran experiments exactly the same as they would have if they had had an observer and a measuring device present, but there was no measuring device or observer present. And the result they got was exactly the same as if an observer had been present or a measuring device had been present. Now, this was big news, eh? this was big time stuff. And Salinger wrote a paper on it.
But can I ask you, do
Sure.
you believe that it just goes God conscious to another conscience? Because ours, as in, was there a time where quantum mechanics could not work because there were no observers? Because the way I understand it, it is not just a conscious mind. It is basically any disturbance becomes, even a particle, becomes a something that would make the wave function collapse, that it's not actually a sentient mind. And so my question would be, do you believe there can even be quantum mechanics then without a sentient mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, I do. What the series of experiments showed was that Salinger and his team, they had the knowledge inside their head of, I'll just get the exact word, they had the knowledge inside their head of the just a minute, give me a sec.
Okay.
Yeah. They had the knowledge inside their head of the path that the photons would take if there was a measuring device there, and if there was somebody observing, the experiment or a measuring device there, then they knew inside their minds what the display on the backboard would be like if there was an observer present. Now, what happened in the experiments without any observer, without any measurements, was that the photons displayed themselves on the backboard as if there was an observer there, as if there was a measuring device there. But it was all in the mind of Salinger and his colleagues.
And can I ask, what is a mind to you?
A mind? Well, that is a question that has been wrestled with for centuries. It seems apparent to me that the mind is not part of the brain. So it's what that experiment showed was that the scientists who were conducting it, they had in their minds how the photons should display themselves on the backboard if there was an observer or measurement being taken. But there was no measurement or observer present, and yet the photons still displayed themselves as if there was a measurement or an observer being there. But it was all just in the minds of the scientists. So that's an example. I think that's a really good example of how in the subatomic world minds can change things. Do you understand?
So I understand what you're trying to say. I would disagree with that interpretation. I think that you can have quantum mechanics and wave function collapsing without a mind. That an observer in a physics sense is different than an observer in when we're just talking as lay people. Because I'm convinced there was billions of years, like I said, without multicellular life. And I wanted to ask a question because you were talking about how you're going to present deistic claims, and you did. My question to you would be, are the claims that you're presenting, is this what personally convinced you, or are these what you think are the best evidences for theism? I know that doesn't have to be a true dichotomy, but my real question is this what convinced you, the arguments that you're presenting?
Oh no. It's one of the things that strengthened my faith.
Okay.
Yeah, strengthened it.
Well, then can I ask, what
Sure.
is it that convinced you that a God is real?
What convinced me was researching and reading an awful lot of material, not just the Bible. It took a lot. My coming to Christianity or to God was the most boring story you could ever listen to. I could put an insomniac to sleep. I could put an insomniac to sleep with my story. There was no lightning bolts from heaven. There was no supernatural, hypernatural type events or anything like that. It was just a very slow realization that there has to be an antecedent. There's no infinite regress. Science has shown that the universe had a beginning. It had a start. Now, something that has a start doesn't happen by itself. Universe just doesn't poof appear out of nowhere by itself. Something or someone has to cause it. And the most plausible explanation from what I was reading, from what I was researching, and talking to other people as well, and atheists as well, was that there has to be something that is non-contingent and is eternal, and that everything can be traced back to. And God still seems to be the most plausible, most parsimonious, and least ad hoc explanation I think there is.
I am not entirely sure if we can have an infinite regress. I know that is a philosophical problem. I would say as far as we can go back is the Big Bang. And we're stuck there because, speaking of quantum mechanics, we cannot solve the theory of everything, which is really a marketing term, because the theory of everything is just trying to tie the big with the small, general relativity with quantum mechanics, which is what a black hole does. It goes into both mathematics and kind of breaks down because you don't know which way to go. Speaking of contingency, because there are a lot of contingent arguments, especially when we start to pull out into deism, can you understand what I mean in that it could be that humans are contingent on a God? It could be that God is contingent on humans.
Yeah, I was gonna actually bring that up. So thanks for bringing that up. It's a good thing to discuss, and let's get into it. I can see the argument about the position of God being contingent on humans, like humans creating a God. Something along the lines of mythologic type tales, this kind of thing, or fables, or creation type stories. The problem with that, though, is that it doesn't. I can't see how human beings can make a god or gods And yet here we are in this cosmos that's almost, 14 billion years old. It's perfectly tuned for human life. And the material, everything we see, is not actually real because it can all be broken down into bits of quanta.
Oh, if I could piggyback off the fine-tuning argument, I would actually say that the universe is not fine-tuned for life. I would say that it is tuned to sometimes allow life. The joke is often that it seems like the universe is fine-tuned for black holes, that a lot of the universe is either freezing or on fire. And so it's really just these small pockets around circumstellar habitable zones that we are actually able to form life, multicellular and single cellular.
Yeah, but you would agree with me that this planet is perfectly tuned for human life, our life, and animal life.
So you say perfectly tuned, and I think it's easy for us to say, look how comfy we are. But it's actually, nature tends to be a cold, hard mistress. We have to deal with a lot of problems, a lot of diseases, a lot of animals that want to eat us. And so although we can pick out, and I'm truly happy to be alive and to be in this era, my lordy, I don't see it actually being fine-tuned for life. I see it being 50-50. I see the good and the bad, which just kind of makes it look like life.
So if you were consistent, speaking about, the not so savory parts of life, okay. If you were consistent, then you'd be kind of agreeable to the argument from beauty, would you?
I would not, because I think that beauty is a metricable thing in that it has to deal with our assessment of things like purity. So you see a wonderful green pasture with a blue lake that is rippling with, it just looks fantastic. I think there are actually biological reasons for why we associate that with beauty. Just like the opposite, when we start to see things rotting, why we start to see horror or fear, why we start to feel repulsed.
Sure. You'd agree, though, that on the flip side of suffering and evil, there is beauty, right?
Sure. I absolutely think there is beauty.
Yeah. So that's good. That's good. At least you've been consistent. That's excellent. So I still really haven't had a good explanation or anything to help me to change my mind regarding this quantum wave function collapse that would collapse with observers and measurements, and then would still collapse without observers and measurements. The only reason that was justifiable was that the knowledge of the wave function collapse was in the head of the scientists, in the minds of the scientists.
Can I tell you why I'm skeptical going down that route?
Sure, yeah, sure.
I'm skeptical because it's not the reason for your faith. And you may say that's unfair. Why aren't you evaluating? I would say I am evaluating the claim in front of you. I disagree on the mind part, on the actual, you need a multicellular organism with a brain, with a mind, chugging away to actually make a wave function collapse. And I'll use it 3 times in a row. I'm skeptical going down that road because I think that it is something that is like fine-tuning or kalam. It's an argument that is supposed to be philosophically interesting, as in, how can we really tell in Schrodinger's cat if something is alive or dead? But a good example why Schrodinger's cat isn't a good example for the mind is that the actual cat in Schrodinger's cat is an observer. All of these things are an observer, and it seems to defy what we would associate with a mind who thinks and breathes and orders cheeseburgers.
Sure. Zellinger's paper was peer-reviewed. It was published by his scientific peers. So I've put it in the video description so you can download it and go through it. But, you know, the event happened. The event happened. And what that event is indicating is that the scientists' minds had some type of dominion over the wave function collapse. Therefore, it seems most likely, given the laws we know about quantum mechanics and the subatomic world, that our consciousness is contingent on a larger consciousness, what secular physicists will call the non-local observer. We call that non-local observer God.
But you also think that this is a mind that has choices, that cares about relationships that we hold because of certain holy text. So even though it is deistic up here, the further we go down, the more baggage we start to collect. I also, when we come to things like contingent arguments, I don't understand how you could show that God is not contingent on us. That if we were to, because it is my belief, just like almost in a opposite form, I believe that you wipe off all of the humans on earth and there go all of the human religions and the gods with them.
If God was contingent on us, that still doesn't explain the cosmos and the way life has developed over millions of years, billions of years.
And I think I can answer. I think there are good reasons as to why life evolved on this planet. Not to get into another subject, a good debate, but I think there's good reasons as to why life came from non-life, which I believe that both theists and atheists believe. I sometimes get a little flack. If you listen to anything from like the Bible, they will say, I commanded it from clay. These are the people that I built. And so I do believe that you need a starting point with a highly volatile chemical reaction that makes something like a virus that is the in-between between life and non-life. And then you start to get bacteria. You start to get mutations that allow for mitochondria. And once the mitochondria come, we get these big fruiting bodies. And I think that's why we're here, along with being in the habitable zone around the sun. I think that is a better explanation than a God.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be to me, because when we look at the text, say in Genesis 1 through 11, all of those texts, they're written in a particular genre. The genre is called mytho-historical, so it's mytho dash historical. Those texts shouldn't be read like literally, you know, like where it says God created the earth and made everything in 6 days. That's a mytho-historical account. And you've got to remember, too, who the author was. The author was Moses, and he was writing to people of his era that were living in a high-context society. So they knew exactly what he was talking about. But that mytho-historical account is just the way creation stories were written in those days. Those creation stories were not written for us in the 21st century.
Well, can I ask then, do you lean harder towards a metaphorical God than a literal God?
Oh, no, he's literal. He's definitely literal from my experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it is the Christian God that you believe in?
Yes.
Resurrected 3 days.
Yep.
So that's a great, you brought up the word fables. And I assume that you do believe that mythology and fables do exist within human cultures.
Oh, absolutely. Of course they do.
And then my question to be tagged on, how do we go about discerning what is fable, what is myth, from what is the true inspired word of God?
Good question. Really good question. So the first thing that needs to be established is that there are no original copies of the Bible anywhere on the earth. The closest we will get to them is the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there's no originals, right? That's a good thing to be up front with. However, the copying and the transmission tradition within Jewish culture was highly, highly valued. If you were a scribe in the ancient Near East, and you had wealthy patrons, you had a job for life. So this is why there's a discipline called hermeneutics. If we didn't need the discipline of hermeneutics, then everybody could read the Bible and know exactly what it says. But that's not the case. And the reason that's not the case is because the authors that wrote the text, they were writing to an audience of their peers. They weren't writing to us in the 21st century. So back then, in the ancient Near East and Mesopotamia, no cell phones, no internet, no Pony Express, no Morse code, nothing like that. Everything was very, very rudimentary. And they wrote to an audience that understood exactly what they're saying. Because in a high context society, Amy, a lot of things were known. The first thing in a high context society is that the family and the wider family circle is highly, highly prized. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be the way today, in a lot of cases. And the reason for that was in those times, in Mesopotamia, your biggest concerns were either war or famine. Those were your two biggest concerns. So the family was really uber important to you because your family protected you and also grew crops for you, tended livestock, all this kind of thing, all the day-to-day needs for survival. So the audience that people like Moses and whoever helped him to write the Pentateuch, they were writing in a style that the audience knew implicitly. They just knew what was being said, and they knew what was myth, and they knew what was historical. But that's why today, in the 21st century, we have this discipline called hermeneutics, which allows us to read the Bible through hermeneutical lenses, and it's able to place us in those ancient times in the ancient Near East. It's hard for us to do. It's hard for us to do, that's for sure, because we're so used to this technological age of having information bang at our fingertips.
Well,
So there's a difficulty. There's a challenge for us.
I would say, I think war and famine, definitely two things that have plagued us as a human species as we try to get out of all sorts of land wars. I don't think religion helps us in that. Maybe for famine sometimes, but not for war. Though I will say, I think a lot of great stories are about family. I think a lot of great books, movies, and games are dealing with how we interact with the people that we love and either choose to be our family or blood relatives. I think that has a lot. I'm a very big fan of mythic structure. I know that the word can sometimes be a little pejorative, but I actually mean it in a good way. I think a lot of good can come from that. My fear always comes in that metaphorical into the literal switching. And
yeah,
so...
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
And so you were talking, just to switch it up onto your last point, you were talking about how he was really interacting, especially in the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Gospel.
Yeah.
A lot of atheists, including myself, have a problem with divine hiddenness. A problem. It seems that the more technology and the more advanced we get, the less recordings of verifiable miracles that we can actually come across. Why does it seem like God is receding with our technology?
Yeah. I know it seems like that. But I've got a lot of accounts of actual physical miracles. I sent one to Praise the other day, and it was all filmed and everything, and it was a lovely lady who was involved in a terrible car accident on Christmas Day, believe it or not. And she was left paralysed from the waist down. Now, she was in a wheelchair for 22 years. And after about the first decade, she kind of gave up on going to healing crusades and that sort of thing, because she'd been pulled out of her chair by people hoping the best for her, and she'd flopped on the ground and all this sort of thing. But anyway, long story short, she was at a church meeting one day, and there wasn't a healing session happening, but the pastor that was there was preaching something about the healing power of God, and she felt for the first time in 22 years sensations in her legs, and she was nudging her husband. She's saying, I can feel something in my legs. Anyway, they filmed everything, and they pulled her out of the wheelchair, and she was able to stand, but of course her leg muscles had atrophied, and she couldn't really walk without the aid of assistance. But now she can walk. She's fine. MRI scans show that her spine is healed. The doctors and surgeons have only said the explanation is an act of God. Now, granted, these acts of God, they're rare. They're very rare, I wish there was more. I really do wish there was more. But that's that doesn't seem to be the way God is doing things for the moment. I don't know why.
Well, if I could just say, because I hear claims like this a lot, and I have nothing but appreciation and love for this person. I hope they legitimately got better after walking away from an accident. My problem comes in that although events like this are rare, they're not impossible, they're not supernatural, they do not defy the laws of physics. In fact, there is a famous atheist joke website, which is whywon'tgodhealamputees.com.
Right.
And so it seems that God's miracles are receding to the unlikely and not the impossible.
Sure. Yeah, and you did right. In the ancient Near East in Mesopotamia, during the time of the patriarchs, this is the Tanakh, this is the Old Testament, and particularly in the New Testament, the presence of God was palpable, particularly in the New Testament. And, you know, it's recorded that some of the followers, I think there were 72 followers of Christ, they went out and they were spreading the good news, you know, they were preaching the gospel, and they came back to their base, so to speak, where Christ was hanging out, and they were super stoked and amazed. They were saying, Lord, Lord, even the demons obeyed us, you know, as long as we invoked your name, you know. And I can imagine their excitement. In
Hey
there.
guys, I don't mean to interject, but we're kind of getting to the end of this debate. It's been a great debate, great discussion. The audience has really enjoyed it. We'll say about maybe 5 minutes or so. We'll go into Q&As, and it should be good. So go ahead and continue on.
Thank you so much again, Praise. In fact, thank you for having Gavin and myself on tonight. It has been awesome, and I enjoyed it. I want to ask you, Gavin, one last question that I ask all of my theist brothers and sisters, and that would be, what would it take you to convince you that you were wrong about the theistic position?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. I've had that a few times, and my answer remains the same, Amy. For me to change my mind, it would need some kind of really good evidence that the entire Bible was just a fabrication, that it was just a story. Yeah, if that could be proven, then I would. Yeah, then my faith would definitely kind of wane quite a bit. Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Can I put the question on you, if you don't mind? What would it take for you to move from your non-belief position to a position of a believer?
So I can't say what would be 100% certainty. I could tell you what would move me into the theistic camp, and I would say it would be empirical evidence.
Gotcha.
I understand for a lot of theists, they say, well, the evidence is metaphysical. It is supernatural. It is above you. Yet I am really looking for something that is as undeniable as me picking up a glass of water, in that I would almost be, I hate to use the word delusional, but the preponderance of evidence would be all towards the theistic side on all of the major biology, chemistry, and physics, that I would almost be in the denial of current science to think otherwise. And I really do want to just know the truth.
We're all truth seekers.
May say it's testing. Exactly. We're all trying to search the right answer.
Yeah, we're all truth seekers, Amy. So, like I was just talking about, and I have to say this quickly because Praise is putting the acid on us. With that lady that was in a wheelchair for 22 years, if you are able to see her MRI scans of her spine being crippled and broken and torn apart, and then after she regained the ability to walk again and showing her spine to be just like a normal person's, would that make you perhaps more sympathetic towards the theist side?
I would say that's more complicated than first blush. What would happen is I would believe that she was healed. And I would then have to go on investigation for why she was healed. I'm not going to say that the supernatural is not an option. It would not be my first option. Nonetheless, I would have to take a look and figure out what is going on.
Yeah, see, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's better than carte blanche saying the hypernatural is impossible, you know. It's good that you've got an open mind and at least would be willing to consider that as an option. So I think that's great.
Absolutely. And just like at least you gave an answer for what would take you closer to the materialistic worldview, because I've gotten answers that have basically said you'd have to take my brain and chuck it, or things like that, which, you know, I don't know how to really give them an answer for that, but even if they're being truthful. So I just appreciate the honest conversation that we have back and forth.
Yeah, it's been great.
Absolutely. How about we end it there, you guys? What a good ending here to a great discussion. I hope the audience checks out both sides' arguments, you know. And so, wow, that'll end the open discussion period. Now we'll head into the Q&As, or the one super chat. I love it. From
we have a super chat.
We do.
Have a super chat.
Freaking awesome. Mac the Human for $4.99. Thank you so much, brother.
Awesome.
Laughing out loud, hook a brother up. It's the holidays. Much appreciated, man. So now we'll go into the questions now. This is from Dissenter 6. So whoever the question is addressed to, you can end with it. So let's say Gavin has a question to him. We'll let Amy respond after Gavin. Then it'll go back to Gavin if he wants to respond. So yeah, Amy knows the drill. So Dissenter for Amy. If God does not exist, why do we experience a sense of transcendence when encountering great art like music, like Debussy's Clair de Lune, for example?
Sure. I would say that transcend is the wrong word. I would say that you are having a fantastic conscious experience. You are witnessing something just like one of our metrics with purity. And so I think it has much more of a biological basis than anything that would transcend the natural.
Gav, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
I think Dissenter 6 raises the great question, and I think the argument from beauty slides right in there as a home run.
And I would say, just on the final note, I think it could be shown in the reverse. And so it's easy to just look at a fantastic lake. It's easy to look at your family and say, they're so beautiful. I love them. I'd do anything for them. But then we can easily turn this on the head and go to a nuclear bomb site or a genocide. There is a lot of horror in the world, too. Not to put down the beauty. It doesn't take away from the beauty, but it does seem to appear like more of a 50-50. Ooh, got a fan down there, Gavin.
Got another super chat. Got a fan. Great job, Gavin. Great discussion to both Pep and Roni. $2. Thank you so much, Peppy.
Don't forget my 10% prize.
And then we got Gurmania's in the house. Good to see you, girl. I love Gur. Talking to him. Question for you, Gavin. What would change your mind away from Christianity?
As I said to Amy earlier, it would have to be proof that the entire Bible was just a forgery, that it was just made up. That would really put a dent in my faith.
Very good. If you want to add on to that, Amy, go ahead, or you just wanted the next question?
I just have another question, and it may be semantics, but on a scale from 0 to 100, how sure are you that the Christian God is your Lord and Savior?
Is that for me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it'd be in the high 90s because we're seriously fallen or seriously flawed human beings. So I think 100% would be a bit deceitful. So I'd say high 90s.
And Gavin, that is a honest answer. Sometimes I get in fact, often I get the 100%. And so the fact that there was even a little bit of skepticism shows to me that you're also open-minded to the back and forth.
Exactly.
And changing your mind.
Great points, guys. So this is Gonna Go For It. What's up, Peter? Question for both. If we can't disprove leprechauns, would that mean they exist? Not a troll question. I don't think it's a troll question.
Sure. Just because we cannot prove something does not exist does not mean that it does not exist. It could be that leprechauns are real. The question is often, you know, could unicorns be real? But a unicorn is actually just a horse with something on its head. And so I would say, once again, it's up to the evidence.
Yeah, I'm open to anything praise. That'll be my answer.
Very good. So Smokey saved for $10. Good to see you, Smokey. I appreciate that $10. Maybe Smokey and you can have a discussion here, Amy, if that's up to you. You know?
I'm all for it.
Awesome. Yeah, we like to bring atheists on this channel and have discussions. Just let me know. Email me at praisejesuschrist@gmail.com. And hopefully we'll treat you right. And
let's figure out a subject and have some fun.
Awesome. Very good. So good debate. Great modding. Blush. Amy.
Great modding.
If people can fail to be convinced with empiricism, solipsis, why do you believe the evidence for God should be undeniably true, undeniable if true?
There are different qualifications for every person. I don't think that there's going to be a standard for any one person. I think I am sometimes rare in wanting empiricism. I think that many agnostic atheists will give you the answer that they don't know. I would say I also agree with them. They say, I don't know, but God would know. That is a valid answer, as much as sometimes it could feel like an escape. You know, if the omni-God knows everything, they should know exactly what convinces us. I would say it is a personal thing. I have just taken time to think what would actually convince me. What convinces me about my beliefs even when they're not God? And it tends to lean in an empirical sense. I understand that a lot of theists will tell me that it can only be there you can only get there from a philosophical position. I think that's flawed. I think that philosophy has a lot of good uses. I think we need it to make fantastic hypotheses. Nonetheless, in a post scientific revolution society, I want empirical evidence in the same way that I want my medication to be double-blind studied.
Very good. Gavin, going to respond to that?
Could you chuck that question at me just one more time, please?
Yeah, it's Smokey's asking Amy or she was originally addressed to Amy, but
okay.
So can people fail to be convinced with empiricism, like solipsis? Why do you believe the evidence for God should be undeniable true?
Well, yeah, that's true. What Smokey's saying, that some people, they can be unconvinced by empirical evidence. My position with God and with Christianity is like it is, based on the historical evidence, the archaeological evidence, the personal evidence of what's happened to me. And let's not forget that faith is a big component of, and I'm speaking for Christians and theists here, faith is a big component of what we do, because by the faith we have in the God of the Bible and in Jesus Christ, we know that God spoke the universe into being, and that he made everything out of what wasn't. He made everything out of something that wasn't visible, right, to the naked eye. And there doesn't seem to be, to me, to be a better explanation than that. So that's where I stand.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Gavin. This is one from Max the Human for you, Amy. What evidence would you consider good for a supernatural claim?
So, supernatural, my joke has always been that's a politically correct word. I think you can fit a lot in those two words, because with super, you could say it's a super amount of fries. Well, how much is a super amount of fries? Is it double? Is it triple? So the answer would be, what would it take, if I could rephrase it, to convince me of a non-natural event? Because I believe that would be a better dichotomy of natural, would be non-natural. I think that it would take me back to empirical evidence. I'm not sure what type of empirical evidence, since we are living in the one universe that we know of. We cannot detect multiverses yet or anything like that, but I would like evidence. The same with words like paranormal. I get told that ghosts are real, which is generally linked to things like an afterlife as well as a consciousness. And so what would it take for me to believe in something non-natural, something supernatural? Once again, it all goes back to evidence. It should be something replicatable, verifiable, and something that can be peer-reviewed.
Very good, Amy. So, Gavin, you would respond to that?
Yeah, well, the paper that Anton Zollinger and his fellow scientists wrote was peer-reviewed, and it showed that in their minds, they knew how the photon particles should react at the subatomic level, and that's what caused them to react. So that's empirical proof, I guess.
Go ahead, Amy, if you want to finish out with that.
It's just, I think it's a misunderstanding of the wave function collapse. It's not that we have to have like a bulky multicellular animal brain. It is that anything that interacts with that experiment causes the wave function to collapse as an observer, including the dead bat or dead cat in Schrodinger's experiment.
Awesome, very good. So a question from Don Willis for you again, Amy. So you're getting tagged here quite a bit. You're doing a good job. Do you have any close Christian friends, inner circle Jesus people?
Oh yeah, I have lots of Christian mods on my server. Come say hi to Eddie from Brute Facts. Come say hi to Will. He has a sports podcast, but sending love to them. I am a big fan. I will often say I am as big tent as can be. I will generally say that I'm trying intellectually to get theists past the deistic line. I'm one of the rare people that has a pet peeve with a transcendent mind. Nonetheless, if you are on Team Science, you're on my team. Like, the God debate is just the back and forth as we break bread. But if you believe in evolution, if you believe in the Big Bang, if you believe in vaccines, and I don't want to get political at all because I am apolitical. I am just here for Team Science, and if you're on Team Science, you're on my team. Come hang out.
Awesome. Gavin, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Well, I'm on Team Science. Pros.
Awesome. We got Smokey saved for another $5 super chat. Thanks so much, brother. By nature, something being supernatural wouldn't be repeatable, and that would then be a natural phenomenon. Your standard doesn't fit reality. Ooh, good one.
Thank you so very much, Smokey, for the super chat. I would say there is a difficulty that we would have going into that, but that we would have to overcome it. So we could say that by definition, supernatural transcends the natural. But it could be the case that there is a cosmos that transcends the Big Bang, and we just haven't been able to find it yet. I also agree, I don't know how you would be able to suss out something unnatural, because the moment that you discovered it, it would be circumvented into the natural world. So it is a difficult question and answer for our biological minds, because I don't even know what a supernatural event would look like or experience, and I've only been given examples through personal experience in other people. And so the bar is high to find a non-natural event. Nonetheless, I'm open-minded.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Gavin, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say that's a great comment from Smokey. I think it's hit the nail right on the head.
So, Maynard saves for $5. Thank you so much, man. Is Gavin pantless again tonight? Love some of my Amy Newman. You rock, girl.
Sending love back.
That was a little bit of rhetoric there for you, Gavin. You took it well. You took it on the cheek there.
Did I check praise?
Go ahead and not check on camera. Just make sure you don't do it on camera. Yeah.
Okay.
So, gonna go for it. Question for both. Do you think only arguments would be enough to be evidence for a god or any god?
Sup, Peter? And I'll go first if you want. I do not think that arguments are enough to believe in God. I do not think that syllogistic arguments like the Kalam and other cosmological arguments or the contingency arguments, I believe that all of these are thought experiments pre the scientific revolution. They were the best that we can do. Nonetheless, you can only go so far in hypothesis making. You can only go, speaking of minds, there's only so far that the arguments can exist in your brain. You have to go, as the adage in science goes, frig around and find out. You have to actually go out and test it.
Very good. So thank you so much, Amy. Gavin, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think arguments have their place, but they're not the be-all and end-all. I think the digital physics argument and the entire world of quantum physics is exciting, and it's opening up areas that were formerly restricted to scientists. And the more we study quantum physics, the more God gets revealed to us.
Got you. That was for both. We'll just go to the next question. So, Mac the Human, so this is for you, Gavin.
What's up, Mac?
Isn't Australia literally trying to kill you? Why would God, etc.?
No, Australia's not trying to kill us.
Very good. Is our last question of the night for you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Would you follow Jesus Christ and accept him as your Lord if you were given enough evidence to prove he was real?
I like the question. I'd say it has two phases. So first, you have to convince me that Jesus is the Son of God, that he exists and all this stuff. Because once they exist, I am in the camp of theism. We can then start to talk about what kind of theistic flavor, if Jesus really is Lord and Savior and all this stuff. And so it would be a two-pronged way of getting me there, because as I've told some theists, there is a chance that I could be convinced of theism and then pick the other side. You know, not to say that Satan is a wonderful human being, but I would actually have to evaluate both sides. Maybe he's as evil. Maybe Satan is as evil as God said. I have a few questions. I have been reading a lot of the Torah lately. I have some questions that I would want to ask about his moral character, and if it was the humans that maybe misinterpreted this and he really didn't mean it. And so TLDR, we would have to prove that Jesus had any connection to a God, and you would have to give me some sort of rational reason to worship. My joke is normally the only person you should worship is your partner. And so I would really need a reason to have this personal relationship, even as a theist, to think that Jesus is Lord and Savior. But I'm, once again, open-minded.
Appreciate that, Amy, for that answer. So, Gavin, to respond to that?
Can you quickly give it to me again, please?
Sure. So, would you follow Jesus Christ and accept him as your Lord? But you already do if you were given enough evidence. So, in Amy's shoes, do you think that was her response? Do you think that was a sufficient response?
Oh, look, I thought her response was very good and very honest. And look, I've had debates with Christian brothers that have been far worse than this, honestly. And this has been a pleasure, a real pleasure.
It has. I concur.
Yeah, yeah. And that is a problem. That is a problem for Christianity. But look, I came to Christianity from a very, very skeptical position. And it was only through a lot of research, particularly historical research, archaeological research, a lot of reading, a lot of talking, that convinced me that the most plausible explanation for us as human beings and for this cosmos is God.
Gotcha, man. Appreciate that. Amy, it was addressed to you. If you want to finalize that, go ahead.
I think that would be the last of my comments.
Awesome, guys. Well, I mean, this is one of my most pleasurable debates I've moderated, and it was a good one. I hope people enjoyed it as well in the audience tonight. And I'm looking forward, maybe Amy come back again, maybe
absolutely
Smokey, some other people, yeah. So great job, both of you guys. I'm proud of both of you guys. So
good job modding, Praise.
Yeah, Praise, good job.
Thank you so much. That means a lot, and that's what I like to hear, you know, and try to be neutral as in the center as I can. I don't want to lean to no side. Peter, thank you so much. Well done, all of you. I agree. Amy was awesome. Addressed everything, Gavin. Okay. So I just want to say this: there's going to be an after show. I didn't see anyone having an after show, so I decided to have one. But so if anyone wants to join in, go ahead and be mine. But if you have your other after show, just let me know, and I'll plug it before we get and cut her off tonight. So just let me know really quick, and I'll shut her down.
Great.
Any after shows?
Thanks, Amy. Great debate.
Absolutely, and thank you, Gavin, for having this debate with me. Thank you, Praise, for modding this debate. It was awesome, and I would absolutely love to be on more.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it again. Jesse says good stuff. I agree. So we'll be heading to the after show. I'll say thank you, everyone. Take care. Peace, shalom in the Hebrew, or whatever other you guys, your greetings and stuff. Go ahead and later. Take care. God bless.
Yes, God bless.
Yeah.